So this session is on sort of this trend that's been more and more obvious for brands and businesses lately around sort of integration of POEM, which is paid, earned, and owned media. And we wanted to talk to you today about why sort of that's happening, why that is important, and show you a couple of case studies. So before we start, I'm going to do, the format works like this. I do the quick sort of introduction around the topic, why this is critical, and then we'll show you several case studies, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. And for Q&A, if you can come up to the mic because we're recording so everybody can hear, that would be great. And to begin, before we kick it off, I wanted to, instead of just kind of doing a dry introduction of our panelists because they're all amazing in their own right, I figured I'll give them a chance and the floor to talk a little bit about who they are, what they do, maybe what they're going to present today, and also what they're passionate about. So why don't we start with Yasha? Oh, yeah.
That's good. My name is Yasha Kakis-Wolf. I'm the CMO of a company, MindJet. We've been around for about 12 years. We're one of the largest collaboration platforms that are out there, virtual whiteboards and project management for the entire team. We're used by about 83% of the Fortune 100 and millions of people around the world. I come from about 15 years of marketing as my background with a very specific emphasis on media optimization and technology and digital marketing. I've spent time at companies like Yahoo, at Microsoft, WebTrends in the analytics space, and most recently, prior to WebTrends, I ran product and marketing for a social marketing platform, Involver. It's now a part of Oracle's Social Cloud. For me, marketing is a pretty exciting time right now. I'm really passionate about organization and operations, the way that teams are able to be successful today. And I've been working with a handful of folks in my organizations for the past several years, applying agile development practices directly into marketing. And it plays a lot into some of the case studies I'm going to share with you today. I won't spend a lot of time talking about agile methodologies, but the work that needs to go into both programs in the media space as well as in your own space have a lot to do with the way that your teams are able to deal with customer interactions and take advantage of them, along with the interactions that you're seeing on the media programs that you're running and the analytics that you see with them. And different practices from the way that we've run marketing for the last 20 or so years are really necessary to be successful today. So that's an area that I'm pretty excited about.
Very cool. Wendy?
Good afternoon. My name is Wendy Lee, and I'm the CEO of Get Satisfaction. And I've had the good fortune to lead the company for the last 4 years. My background is all around relationship building between a consumer, a customer, and a brand, a product or service that they have passion for. And I've been doing that for a long, long time. Fell in love with Get Satisfaction as soon as I met the founders and saw it as a wonderful opportunity to set up a new role for community. And that's especially important now as we see the convergence between media and content and community. And the interconnectedness there is what Yasha and I will be talking about. But I'm honored to be here, and I hope you have some good questions for us to help you with.
All right, wonderful. Casey?
I'm Casey Gillette, and I'm the Director of Online Marketing at Co-Marketing. We are a B2B-focused online marketing company, primarily search and social. I've been in the search industry for about 8 years, and once social started to come onto the scene, I was really excited about it, right? I'm passionate about Twitter, which is super nerdy, I realize, but I love it, right? And I love that ability to just talk to customers and talk to people who share those same interests. And one of the really cool things over the past year is just this integration of search and social together. I just love it, and that's really it. I also really like food, so I'm sure we can all relate.
Yes, I love food. Hi, I'm Wayne Saint-Amand. I'm the Vice President of Global Marketing at Crimson Hexagon. Crimson Hexagon is actually a software platform that's designed to help you understand what consumers think and feel about you based on what they're saying online, all of that qualitative information. And it's a really incredibly interesting time because each and every day, billions of people are telling you exactly what they want you to do next. Whether you're a brand marketer, an advertiser, somebody who cares about what people are saying online so that you can better manage your brand. Each and every day, people are telling you what they want you to do next online. And there's an unprecedented opportunity to harvest that information and use it to do the right thing and to remove risk from your marketing program. So I'm pretty passionate about understanding my consumers as a software company, and looking forward to talking a little bit about how you measure all of this conversation online as these different ways of marketing begin to converge.
Right, thank you. I'm Ekaterina Walter. I'm social innovator at Intel, and what that means is every year we just sort of reinvent what it means to make Intel a social business company. So I've been doing social media for the past 5 years there, and so we've done everything from setting up the basics and the training to growing global strategies. We have pretty large social communities, over 26 million fans on Facebook in over 50 countries that are highly engaged, a large community of 1 million followers on Twitter. And so, last year what we've done, we integrated our paid media team with our social media team and called it integrated media team because we realized why this topic is so important. Also, I just wrote a book called Think Like Zuck, and I was told by organizers to let you know that the signing of the book is going to be on the second floor at 3:30, so shameless plug here. And so with that, let's move on. All right, so so if you look at the sort of a Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, social properties, which type of media do you think that is? Paid, owned, or earned? Come on, shout out. Exactly, right? All three anymore. So, and that's what brands are starting to realize more and more. But here's the thing, Yasha talked about the sort of this need for creating a mindset around agility and around convergence and integration. And what I noticed talking to a lot of brands, and what we kind of talk about a lot is how do you not only create convergence of mindsets, but also convergence of departments. And so over the last several years, we started working very closely, and I think you'll see in the case studies shown with creative departments, with paid media department, with messaging departments, and others around the company to actually create that sort of a united, integrated approach to what paid and social should be. And because the reality is it's not about just relevance anymore. It's also about amplification. And the combination of all of those functions will give you amazing impact. But the other problem is convergence of tools and analytics been hard for us, because when you look at sort of how we've been measuring paid, it isn't particularly exactly the same way that we can measure social. And so we found the system to customize that and look at the social actions or just any actions that people take online, whether it's with your paid content or owned or earned content, and kind of bring it all into the system that allows us to measure sort of apples to apples of all of the interactions and exposure that we're getting. So together with what we found is the sort of those three form this holistic brand story and sort of a comparable sort of results that you can improve over time. And we're still working on it. We're still not perfect, but that's one of the things that's been happening in the last several years for us as a brand. Before we go into the case studies, I wanted to show you this data, you guys. So Ogilvy did this study. They looked at sort of restaurant chains sort of on the retail side, and they tracked purchasing behavior of customers. And they looked at over 20 media channels. And sort of how they spend, how they find out about the brand, and what their awareness and purchase factors are. And here's what they found, which was mind-blowing to me. When I showed it to my management, they go, really? And that was about a year ago. Social media, if you partnered with in traditional channels, so in this case, PR exposure, for example, was associated with a 17% increase in spend compared to the prior time when they didn't have the combination of those messages, and 2 to 7x if you pair it up with different other combinations. So social media plus any traditional like TV, out of home, etc. And that's kind of mind-blowing. And when the study came out, people were looking at it saying, really? Is that, we've expected social alone to bring more exposure than otherwise. Here's another data point. In 4 out of 5 cases where sales impact was observed, people were exposed to social media in one more additional channel. So pretty interesting combination, but every single one of them talks about importance of that. So I wanted to show you this chart before I move on. You can find it on altimeter side, it's from Jeremiah Yang's report, Altimeter's report. And, we've been using this cycle for a while with our content, right? You put together content strategy, you publish it and distribute through your communities and channels. You look at what engagement looks like and how people interact with you. You use paid media channels to amplify it, and you just basically restructure based on the data you're getting, and you repeat it, rinse and repeat it, let it rinse, repeat again and again until you find the best optimization that works for you. So I wanted to give you this quick introduction, a couple of data points to kind of set it up, and now we're going to give you several case studies. So Case is going to talk to you a little bit about integrating, it's what they did with, I think, is it John Deere? With John Deere, and a little bit about search. Wendy and Yasha will talk to you about another case study and show you some additional interesting information, sort of how the integration works together. And then Wayne will take you through some interesting study and research that they just recently done on the topic that even will kind of bring the point home a little more. And then we'll open up for questions. So here you go. Let me give you the mic.
I'm not sure I can coordinate two hands doing two things. So, we're talking about this idea of, paid, earned, and owned. And, like I said, I've been in the search business for a while, and as social comes about, we have done, we've seen this happen, and we're trying to figure out how do we integrate everything we're doing. And so I want to use this case study. This is the used division of John Deere. If I hadn't have told you guys that, how many of you would have known this was John Deere? Exactly, there's no branding. And so what we had found was just that it was becoming really difficult for us. We had been working on the site for a couple years, and there just was no brand association. And despite how much people love John Deere, there's nothing here. So no one was talking about it, no one was sharing our content. So we had to figure out what can we do, and that's where social came in. So when we're thinking about our social strategy, we're like, all right, what can this do for us? Well, first, it can garner some brand association. Not necessarily awareness, which we want that, but more just the association. We could also factor in our keyword searches, right? So that was one way that we were going to figure out if this was working. How many people started searching for John Deere Machine Finder, right? How many people started using that brand name? And lastly, there's this idea of earned media. And anyone in the search business knows that earned media equals links, right? And that's a big deal. So we were trying to figure out how can we do all these things using social. So first we looked at the assets we have. People love this brand. I mean, they are passionate about it. They love it. They wear t-shirts, they wear hats, they get together and they talk about it. So that was our audience that we had to get them to know that we were part of that brand. We were running paid campaigns. We were running paid search campaigns. So we had some of this keyword data, and this is really invaluable when thinking about your social strategy, is that what else are you running? So we knew we had data on what was converting. We had data on what people were searching for. So we had to factor that in to our social strategy. This was our owned, right here, this blog. This was the one thing that we had to work with outside of social. That was what we were going to try to drive people to and try to get people to share that content. So we started with Twitter and Facebook, and with Twitter, we took, there's that always find the influencers, find the people that you want to talk about you. But what we did was instead of just searching general terms like tractors, combines, Deere, what we did was we took some of that paid information, the paid keywords that we knew that worked, and we started looking through those profiles and identifying people that way. We also geared our content strategy toward the channel. And this is where that integration really matters, because for a lot of people, you're creating content and then you're pushing it out. We had to figure out how to give the people on Twitter the content that they actually wanted. And so what we found is that people on Twitter love lists, right? They love lists, they love stats, they love figures. So we had to integrate that into our content strategy. We also found that there's a lot of people who love to talk about farming and agriculture. There is a Twitter chat called Hay Talk. Yes, people are out there talking about hay. And so what we did was we jumped in on that, right? And so we're on those weekly. We're getting involved, and people now know that Machine Finder is involved in the community, and they're a part of John Deere. And so more and more people started talking about it and sharing our content, and now they're aware of it. Facebook was the second channel, mainly because it's a lot easier to find interest, right? Similar to Twitter, it's easy to search and find interests. And, a couple years ago, you could search by groups. Now there's Open Graph, which really just opens it up, right? There's this whole other window of opportunity. But we were trying to figure out who are the people who love Deere, who are the people who love talking about farming. And so we kind of joined those groups and started participating. The second thing about Facebook that was a really big deal for us was the idea of location targeting. The whole goal of Machine Finder is to drive people back to the dealer pages. So dealers come, they list their used equipment, and they have auctions, right? So our goal is to drive people to those dealer pages and get them to be aware that someone in their area is selling. There's a really cool thing on Facebook where you can target specific areas. So if there's an auction in Ohio, we don't have to have our entire community see that post. We could target it to just Ohio. And people in Washington aren't like, ugh, why are they filling my feed with crap that doesn't relate to me? So that was a really big deal. Phototherapy, I put this on here because people on Facebook love pictures. And you know what they love more? Pictures of John Deere tractors. So that's what we went with, right? We started creating posts that included pictures. We just created one the other day that was like the 100 best, John Deere pictures. And I mean, it spread like wildfire. They also love infographics. And one thing that, we're really proud of is that we created this infographic about, a little bit of John Deere history. And through the years, and if you search for it, it has something like 80,000 results. Because that's how many people picked it up and started talking about it and sharing it with one another. Even more so, it's hanging in the John Deere factory. So the main producer of John Deere tractors in America has our infographic hanging in their building. And that's really cool, right? So this is how we started to measure things. We looked at total searches, how many people were actually searching for the site. And we saw that more than doubled in a couple years, which was cool. And that's what we wanted to see. Here's your earned, right here. You can see the top is our main site, and the bottom is the blog. I'm going to let you guys figure out when our social strategy really started to pick up. Pretty cool. And lastly, this was our brand searches. And this was a really big measurement, right? These are those John Deere turns that I was talking about. In a couple years, they more than tripled. So, again, this is just through social. This is just through the blog. These things, integrating all these things just was really what drove this. And so the takeaways, when you're thinking about your social strategy and you're thinking about how you can integrate all these things, use the keyword data you have, right? Use keyword tools. Facebook has a really cool tool, their ad creation tool, that lets you really dig into keywords. Same with Twitter. If you're going to run a promoted Twitter campaign and you're already running a paid search campaign, think about those keywords that are working and integrate that into your Twitter campaign instead of kind of going in blind. This biggest one, create content by channel. Like I said, don't create content and then hope to push it out to your audiences. Because what someone likes on Twitter may not be what someone likes on LinkedIn. And you need to be aware of that if you really want to, generate more shares by channel. Create target lists. You have this idea of, getting earned media and getting links. Go in the opposite direction. Find a publication that you want to be a part of, that you want to be aware of you. Go through, find their editors, find their authors. Use a tool like Reportive. It'll give you their social stuff, maybe their personal email. And you can start creating these lists. You can create private lists on Twitter that you're aware of, and now you know who you want to kind of target. And lastly, this is just the search nerd in me, is that when you share something on social, if you have a new product, a new page, a new category, a new blog post, put it on Google+, put it on Twitter. It'll get indexed faster and more likely to show up. So that's it.
Thank you. All right. All right, Wendy, next up,
All
Wendy.
right. Here we go. I don't know whether to move to the middle or the left or
Yeah,
the
it's
right.
a little bit.
I think I'll just move right out here. Wonderful opportunity to showcase again a case study around the blend, the interconnectedness between media, content, and community. So let me tee that up and give you some of the history that we at Get Satisfaction have been part of, I would say, over the last 5 years. We have learned from over 3,000 paying customers and over 70,000 customers in our network the real value of creating a connection at any point the customer wants it with your brand, at any point. So that connection can begin in Facebook, it can begin in Twitter, it can begin on any page of your website, it can begin in a product flow, in a transaction flow if you're a commerce site. But wherever that customer is expressing themselves, they're probably looking for others like them so they can connect and talk about the things that matter to them at that stage. So in doing some research, we learned how important it was for your customers, your consumers, to make their way back home to a critical asset that we as marketers have invested a lot in and are very important to us, and that's our website. Consumers want the website, your brand sites, to be as social and engaging as the other networks they're experiencing. And so that is a big responsibility that we have. When we talk about consumer interaction and where they are in their own journey, there's a very simple frame here, and Yasha is going to talk more about this. But at the end of the day, this is a beautiful way to bring this convergence together of paid, earned, and owned. In the first part of the life cycle, you see very clearly that customers are trying to discover products, services, solutions that they have passion about. Then they are actually engaging in paid media and finding more about those products and services. And then they go around and they are actually transacting. Again, finding people like them that have bought that product. Then they're unwrapping the product. They're telling others about the experience they're happening. Get Satisfaction is uniquely designed to capture all those interactions, pull them into one place, and make them more discoverable. That was my water. That was very special. And then as those experiences want to be talked about more between each other and out in the social web, then advocates take that message forward. And that would be more as you're continuing the customer journey. So the opportunity we have in a community environment to engage with consumers wherever they are and bring this convergence together is quite remarkable. And the payoff on SEO is very unique because we're able to expose that content to others, and therefore the search engines love that. They have a very rich appetite for that kind of ongoing customer interaction. So Yasha's going to talk very specifically about what he learned at MindJet to give you more specifics about the application of social community to content and media.
Perfect.
There you go.
Thank you, Wendy. I want to touch on something that Ektrina brought up early on. We have to think about organization of teams and our buying processes differently. At Intel, they put together teams for media buying and content creation, and that drives a lot of your innovation today. That's actually something that isn't special just for large companies that have huge resources. In fact, in companies that are around my size, let me give you some context, that's something that's very applicable. And it's one of the big takeaways that I want you to take away from the next couple of slides. It doesn't matter the size of the organization. The integration of paid, earned, and owned is actually critical, important, and very, very possible. So our business is about plus $50 million a year in revenue. We've been around for about 12 years. We spend several $1 million a year in marketing, in demand gen in particular. So we have a decent-sized budget. And our budget has been fairly locked to the channels that it's been run in for the past several years because our business has been successful and continue to grow, so why change things? When I came into the company about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago, we began to look at different ways to deploy our budget, ways that we could actually find successes. Ektrina also said that it's important to have a relationship to the success of the business, a measurement to the success of the business. And sometimes it's difficult when we think about paid and earned to find a relationship back to the business. How many of you are in B2B businesses? So in the B2B world, I think we have a bit of an advantage here, and that there's a very tight relationship between sales and marketing. We understand what success for the business looks like. There is a value exchange that takes place between sales and marketing. In our business, we look at kind of 3 results and 3 objectives that we set up between the sales and marketing teams. It's the amount of pipeline that we generate, it's the amount of revenue that we contribute, and the third is the amount of trials that we actually start. So when we look at success for any campaign that we run, integrated or in a singular channel with a single set of activities, we actually look at those successes, and it's incredibly quantifiable for us. All of the results are. Let me tell you a little bit about this campaign that we ran, and let me relate it back to the successes first, and then I'll get into some of the stats around it. Over the course of the last year and a half, we've run quite a few different integrated campaigns that look like this. And one of the learnings that I'm going to take away, or share as a takeaway for you today, is that the applications for integrations within campaigns with teams are not just applicable to media campaigns and to social networks. They're actually very applicable to your website. I'll get to that in just a moment. It reinforces what Wendy was saying. So our team, in the course of the last year and a half, ran this campaign for the course of 2 quarters. It's called Between the Minds. I'll tell you about it in just a second, the way we set up the team. But in the course of this campaign being run, with $50,000 of media being put behind it to amplify some of the content and the engagement, we actually drove up engagement and ultimately trials for a business greater than 30%. So when you think about the context of a business that's our size, a 30% increase in contribution to potential revenue is pretty enormous. And this wasn't done with an absolutely enormous marketing campaign either. This really goes, from our perspective, to the power of the application that you get when you actually integrate paid and earned together. So let me tell you a little bit about the way we set up the team that ran this. Trina also spoke about this very briefly. We think about our operations very similar to the chart that she showed from Altimeter. Content creation and content strategy actually drives the way that we build out our teams. So in this case, we developed a campaign very closely with one of our agencies of record. We created a very small group of people, about 6 people. The 6 people were all of the operators that were responsible for the work on the day-to-day basis. So a designer from the design team, an analyst from our team, a marketing manager, one of our paid media buyers, and a couple of other folks that were on the team. We developed a concept that within our different communities, Facebook, Twitter, and on our own communities, our blog in particular, we introduced this concept of being able to create a duality in our customer base, and our prospect base, and our community. You all naturally assume that you fit into one of 2 different buckets when somebody gives you 2 different buckets to pick from. Are you a thought leader or a do leader? Are you an East Coaster or a West Coaster? Are you a European or an American? This concept for us worked well in all these different channels, as you can imagine that it would, but most importantly for us, what we found is that the continual cycle of iteration played very well into this idea and played very well with our team structure. So we created this content strategy. We didn't produce all of our content in advance. What we actually did was produce the first idea, introduce it as a blog post, break down that blog post with the comments, and then start to share that blog post out into other social channels. So once we got engagement, we would actually promote it on channels like StumbleUpon and other areas like that. As we started to get more and more engagement, where people were communicating to us about their opinion on whether or not they were a thought leader or a do leader, we began to take that feedback, start to promote the engagement, and then actually make modifications to the content. So in this case, this was an output infographic that was promoted out into Facebook once we had engagement on the initial blog posts and some of the initial infographics that we introduced out. This was possible for us because we integrated the team, the media buying team, the content development team, the design team, and even the field marketing organizations that were responsible for bringing this out to our sales teams. So what did this do for us overall? So these numbers in context, again, our business, the size of our business, are pretty meaningful. The punchline for us is that we believe that it wasn't just the smart operation and the right creation of content and the production of that content into the right channels, but very specifically, the integration of our media buying team with our team that was actually building the content. Our isolated social marketing result, this is very specifically the buying that we did in different channels like Facebook and Twitter and other channels. This drove our campaign. This drove our results. And this was the direct relationship, this paid media portion. And this was a direct relationship back to that 30% increase in trials for our business that quarter. So here's where we move past kind of the validation that this is important, the integration of media, the integration of content, the integration of operations. We move past this being a campaign, and we move into it being a part of the website. Our biggest learning coming from here wasn't that the team worked very well. It's that this model of content creation, engagement, promotion of engagement, and then changes on that content needed to have a tighter relationship with our core business. And so we set out to figure out how we could take a business that had traditionally grown very healthily with word of mouth, find a way to facilitate better conversations, and ultimately help introduce these conversations and this engagement into our business. We looked to get satisfaction, which is why I'm up here with Wendy. And what we have done, we think is pretty interesting and exciting, and we're starting to see the results for it today. Next time we come back, we can share some of these results, but I can tell you right now that once we've begun to integrate the community interactions directly into our owned asset, the biggest owned asset which we have, which is our website, we've started to see a very significant increase in conversions into all of the activities that we think are important. So again, pipeline generation with leads, marketing qualified leads, actual transactions to our e-commerce business. Everything has moved up in the high single-digit rates, with the only addition in our business being a closer integration with our community. So again, all of the same rules that are now beginning to apply to integrated media campaigns, paid, owned, and earned, have a very tight relationship to your business. And there are some really interesting technologies out there like Get Satisfaction that can actually empower your business to do that today.
Hi, everyone. Let's shift gears here for a minute. I want to get you thinking a little differently. So when we talk about measurement, which is what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes, one of the things that people often default to is they start thinking about numbers. Numbers of likes, follows, mentions, revenue. Revenue is an important one. And all of those other volumetric measures are also extremely important. But one other thing that I would urge you to think about is, can you understand what consumers think and feel about the construct that is paid, owned, and earned? That's sort of a vendor-centric construct. It's how we divide the different mediums that we play in. But from the consumer's perspective, their brains naturally go there. They integrate all of these things. They experience your brand in these sort of multi-channel aspects all at once. So they're integrating it. I think we, as vendors, as marketers, are working now to do what their brains are already doing, but in a more coordinated fashion. So how do you know if you're really successful at doing this? So hopefully, as we go through this presentation, we will learn some of the ways that we can be a bit more successful here. So I think this is kind of an obvious statement, but it's worth talking through. Social media, I have here social media data has changed the game, but social media in general has changed the game. You heard me mention in my introduction a little bit that this time is incredibly unprecedented because we have the opportunity to listen to consumers by the billions talking about the things, many of them, that we care about personally, that we care about professionally, and make sense of those things. All of that information is qualitative information. It's thoughts, it's feelings, it's emotions, it's intent. These are extremely difficult things to quantify and measure because it's the sum of words. And social media really, these days, yes, there are certainly image-based vehicles like Instagram and others, but the majority of social media interaction, conversation, if you will, is words. It's expressed intentions, desires, emotions. These things are very difficult to quantify, to measure precisely, and to make sense of. But if you can, there's a huge payoff. And I would argue that the earned media component, which is getting people to talk about you, understanding how they're reacting to you and what you're doing, there's a huge payoff there. And again, they're telling you what they want you to do next. So social media and social media data has definitely changed the game. Again, you know this. I think there's an IBM stat out there that says all of the information that's existed, or rather that's been created in the last 24 months is a larger source of information than all of the information created since information was created up until the last 24 months. So there's a massive amount of information being created today. And social media is being created at an incredible rate. And it's sort of adding to this cumulative database, if you will, of consumer commentary that we can listen to. And it's all unsolicited. That's the amazing thing. If you think about sort of traditional market research, you have to ask somebody a question. And the mere act of asking them a question colors their response. So it's a bit less truthful. Social media commentary, what we're all talking about to our friends or offering publicly on Twitter to people who we may be friendly with or not is all unsolicited. So it's observed. You're observing consumers in the wild, if you will, acting and expressing as they normally would. So it's very valuable to collect that information. So just for Crimson Hexagon, because we're in the business of measuring social media, we're gathering and collecting social media. Just us, we've actually collected over 260 billion posts in our social media analysis library. And we're adding to that library by 1 billion new posts every 2 days. It's a massive amount of consumer opinion that we're collecting on a regular basis, and a huge opportunity. And we don't even collect it all. We think we like to collect it all, but it's impossible for, frankly, any one vendor to collect it all. But that's a tremendous amount of information to be able to leverage and access. So what's the opportunity here? We think some of the opportunity, not all of it, but a good portion of it is to quantify the qualitative on a massive scale in near real time. So it's to gather all of these conversations that are relevant to you and to measure them and put those to work for your business. It's kind of like this virtuous circle where you do something that consumers react to. They react to it on social media. You measure and analyze it, react to it, activate and recalibrate your business programs, and the circle starts again. And it's this continuously iterative process, all driven by all of this qualitative information that you can gather and measure precisely online. So there are many platforms out there, we're among them, that measure sentiment. But we would argue that measuring sentiment alone, sort of basic sentiment, doesn't really tell you the whole story. So a lot of platforms will start out, this particular analysis is for a major domestic automotive brand, and they'll tell you the number of mentions of a particular keyword, and they may go so far as to break down the percentage of conversation that's sort of, basic positive, basic negative, basic neutral. And this is important to know, but it's not quite as valuable as if you can understand the drivers. What are the emotional themes and the expressed concepts inside of the conversation? So if you're a marketer for this particular brand, it's extraordinarily important for you as you build your marketing messages that a fairly large percentage of this group in the positive category thinks that your brand is legendary. That's a very powerful emotive characteristic. And if you're in branding, if you're in marketing for this brand, and you want to build campaigns that are going to resonate with people, understanding that people think the brand is legendary. And by the way, there's 100 different ways, perhaps 1,000 different ways that people can express the concept of legendary. They don't necessarily have to use the word legendary. So when you analyze social media, you need to, and the consumer commentary, you need to be doing it in a sophisticated enough way to be able to pick up on concepts that aren't expressed with exact words. So we're going to move now into a little bit of a case study where we're going to show you some data. In this case, we're going to take a look at Old Spice. So this particular analysis is over about a 7-8 month period. It's about 175,000 posts that we're analyzing. This particular conversation is just a Twitter analysis. It could have included Facebook or blogs or forums or any number of other areas where commentary happens. But in this case, we analyzed Twitter in particular. And you can see here that the majority of the conversation is engagement around the brand, and specifically around certain campaigns that they're running, and people really praising the marketing, liking the marketing, finding the marketing to be tremendously entertaining. A relatively small portion, certainly the minority, is talking negatively about it. But of that negative conversation, a large portion is actually criticizing the campaign. So you can see here that in terms of the paid and owned portions of the media, this is somewhat polarizing, what Old Spice has done. But the majority is actually quite excited about the brand here. So you can see this is actually 1 week in March where Old Spice was running a particular campaign called the Wolf Dog campaign. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. We may have some people that are a bit outside the demographic for this particular Old Spice product. But when this campaign ran, we see this massive jump in conversation around this particular campaign. You can see it visually here. It goes from a sort of line level to this massive spike. Sorry. I've made the mistake of making my chart such an eye chart that I can't read them. So the really cool thing about this is they've driven, in this particular analysis, they've driven 93% of the conversation as people engaging with this particular campaign. So you can see the sort of the large chart there, engaging with Mr. Wolf Dog campaigns. 2% about the news about the campaign, and then 5% specifically reacting, saying, hey, this is cool advertising. But these are people, this large segment here, who are actually getting involved, interacting with the Mr. Wolf Dog campaign, and actually sharing the links and sort of spreading the word, doing the work of Old Spice marketing themselves and becoming part of the campaign. So this is very successful from an earned perspective and from the other perspectives. From a demographic perspective, as we measure social media, obviously given the demographic, the majority of the discussion here is male, almost 80%. I think if you're Old Spice, having roughly 21% of the conversation be female is actually quite a success. And then if we want to look at where this particular campaign was popular, it's actually in the upper Midwest. So even in social media, you can run regional campaigns and understand who's talking, who's tweeting, and where. And one of the hallmarks of this campaign, Mr. Wolf Dog, by the way, is a fictional character that essentially Old Spice hired to be their director of marketing. This is big sort of YouTube campaign, very socially driven. One of the things that Mr. Wolf Dog did as part of this campaign was encourage people to play online games with Xbox. And I believe that there was a partnership with Microsoft. And the Mr. Wolf Dog character got online and Xbox Live and actually interacted with a lot of people online. And this little arrow here that we're pointing to qualitatively is talking about the expression of playing games online, video games, with Mr. Wolf Dog. And that campaign alone, just over a 1 week period, created 69 million impressions, again, just on Twitter. So this has been a very powerful campaign for Old Spice. It's something that's only been around for a few months and is relatively inexpensive in the world of advertising and media campaigns, but has been very successful at getting people to talk about the brand, to spread the word, to be excited about the brand, to think that the brand is very fun, and to engage with the brand, and ultimately drive revenue performance for Old Spice. And I believe we are ending.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. I actually have a question for you. So, yeah, I'll give it back to you. So, you know how as brands we're really always freaking out about the fact that if we try something new or go, we take the risks and something doesn't work out or people will hate it. And I've heard statistics that says actually on average out of most of the mentions online, about 6% of them negative around all of the brands. So I think that's sort of a false expectation, a false fear that we as brands have. So as you looked at all that data, I'm just curious, on average, what does this come out to? Or what is the overall average percent of negative mentions around brands out there?
There is no average. There is no one thing. I mean, the one thing that's true is if it's a negative topic, there's going to be a lot of negativity. It'll be predominantly negative.
Filtered appropriately, right? With the right keywords and right understanding, right?
The answer is it really depends.
Okay.
And because, again, we think the opportunity is to look at what's driving the negative and to really understand the themes and the drivers of that sentiment. We tend to not want to just look holistically at negative. We want to understand, for example, if a brand is going through a crisis, is that crisis going to create a sort of a one-time, just a few-day peak
Right.
that you can, where the counsel would be, step away, don't react to this, because if you add fuel to the fire, you're actually going to make the crisis worse.
Right.
Or is this lasting 3, 4, 5 days? And then more importantly, what's the crisis from the consumer's perspective? Because the answer may be different than you originally assume. So it really varies. But getting under the covers, if you will, of that negativity or that positivity is really important in terms of understanding what to do next.
Exactly. It's all in the opportunity, right? Because we'll look at it as negative, but it's our immediate opportunity to turn it into gold and turn people who hate this particular topic or product into loyalists because we addressed it in the right way.
Absolutely.
Right? All right, so now time for questions. If there's any questions in the room, if you can come up to a mic.
Before you take questions,
Okay.
just a thought, because we have a chance to be in these sessions a lot, not always together, but a lot. One of the things that when I hear smart people like you guys talking about what you do, and honored to be with Yasha as one of our customers, the brain power that it takes to make sure you're buying the right media at the right places.
Right.
I mean, that's like a whole piece of work. I mean, you have to analyze it and, say you're going to get a return on it. That's huge, right? That's a big piece of work, and I know you guys are experts in that. The second piece of work has to do with all this creativity, like exactly what's going to be the next way to get people talking and to get, either in the social web or on the website. The creativity required through an agency or your own team using agile methods or whatever, that's huge. And then I sit here sometimes thinking, well, resources are always slim, right? Buying media, being creative, using agencies, bringing your team together, that's time. At the end of the day, I want us to just pay attention to the fact that customer conversations are alive and well all the time. So if you can find a way to listen, learn, harness them, and expose them, right? Because people want to talk anyway. This is why it's such a great time for marketers. People want to talk about things they have passion about, like them or don't like them anyway. So here we have a chance to harness that at every stage and expose it, both in social networks and the website. Right. So just want to put that out there, because I think as marketers, I think of my own marketer who's stressed out every minute about not having enough money and not having enough time and not having enough everything. I'm thinking, what about our 70,000 customers and what they're saying? Why can't we pull that, use our own product, expose it, and then that captures more people like them? Just saying.
So, all right, so let's talk, since we don't have anybody coming up to the mic just yet, but let's talk about the content. So, all right, so we talked about one question. I'll get, since I kind of started, give me 1 minute. Right. So the content part of it. So what I noticed is, as we go through this reiterative process, right? You talked about it, Yasha, and we'll kind of go, creation, distribution, measurement, and it goes all the way around. What we noticed as a brand, it's that the whole rise of visual, social media, visual content is important. So we're looking at it and saying, hey, if people interact with the pictures, with the videos, just reach media way more than they interact with any sort of other content. As a matter of fact, if you look at some of the data, Facebook says that overall, when I talked to them recently, they said that they get 2x engagement around, pictures, for example, rather than any other content. So as you guys kind of looking at sort of not only creating organic content, but also turning that organic content into media. So, for example, to sponsored stories or into any sort of a media buy, how are you looking at content? And are you looking at content from perspective of, listen, we played and learned, we do A/B testing all the time, and this works here or that works. Is there any tips that you can offer us as marketers around that, and how to create and then amplify the content in the right way, and what does and doesn't do well? And I'll start with you, Yasha.
A couple of comments there. So a comment that Wendy made I think is important, something that we all deal with in the marketing space. Prioritization is actually the problem that exists in an organization. It's not resources. You're always a right size for the resources in your organization. Right. You're never, or very rarely, right sized for the type of prioritization that you have. We all kind of deal with this phenomena, the hippo, right? The highest paid person in the office. Maybe it's our CEO, maybe it's somebody else. But somebody says, I have the right idea. You guys need to go figure out how to do this. And then it maybe does or doesn't work. It's a pretty big challenge. I think about media buying and content in the exact same way. If you have the opinion that you're going to get it right or that you understand exactly what's going to work in each of the channels at one specific time, I'm not saying that learning isn't important, but if you believe that you're going to get it right, you're probably not going to. Or it's going to be a miss more often than it's a hit. So the way that we think about prioritization is actually to keep a steady set of resources that are available for content development and media buying in a period that we're comfortable with. So we actually use a month-long time period from a budgeting perspective. This may or may not be something that everybody else does, but we very specifically on a monthly basis allocate our budget for media buying and allocate our budget for content creation. So the amount of people that are working on content, the different types of content, and the media that's going to support it. The reason that works for us is because it always allows for us to prioritize. What do we think is most important? Do we need to be focusing on visual content? Do we need to be focusing on long-form content? Is it video content? It's going to change, and it's going to change frequently. And for us, we found the right cadence, and that cadence happens to be a month. So my recommendation is to solve the problem of prioritization, pick the time periods for which you can use your resources, the ones that you have.
But how do you look at the data that drives those questions and decisions of what are you focusing that particular month?
You know, as Wayne would tell you, the data is available to you all of the time. It has to be a core part of the way that you operate.
Right.
So each of our teams that work on campaigns, if they're working on specific campaigns, are either empowered directly with the data, so everybody in our organization knows how to use the tools that we have, or there's a specific analyst. If it's a particularly complex multi-channel campaign, we'll bring one of our data scientists onto that part of the team for that period of time. The data should be a part of everything that's happening.
Agreed.
And that's just an operational philosophy. It's not a specific resource. It's just
And not
what you
one
have to
off,
do.
right?
It's definitely not one off. It's
Yes.
a core part of what you do.
All right, sounds good. Now, before I get to 1 second, I want to hear what Cassie has to say because you talked a little bit about visual too, and
Yeah,
what
and-
works in search, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, we look at analytics all the time. We look at Google Analytics, we look at search analytics, and we start figuring out our editorial calendar about a month in advance for almost all of our clients, truthfully. Because how we are going to gauge that is there's always got to be a mix of, yes, a photo post is fun, but there has to be that other mix of the long-form content, right? So we kind of look at that and schedule it out, based on what we're seeing. So recently, for Machine Finder, we actually went through and scoured 2 years of analytics data to see what were the top posts shared, where were they shared,
Wow.
and that helped gauge our content strategy for 2013 and the next couple months moving forward.
Very good.
Oh, and I'd also add, for that long-form content, when you're thinking about promoting it, one thing we think about is, yes, people on Facebook love photos, so you know what you do? You lead with that photo, right? Post the photo and then post the blog on top of it.
to the
and
link.
drive to
Because
the link.
long-form content, it has its value and it's not dead. All right, we'll go to you. Sorry about that.